Awesome. It is November 15th, 2023. The year is flying by. And we've all jumped on this call to talk through consolidating the different navigation modes. This came up actually in a previous hallway hangout. And one of the things that also came up during the community summit was having more working style sessions rather than just discussions. So getting folks on the call from different backgrounds and different teams to actually talk through in real time how to address different problems that are coming up and kind of just to move in a bigger way, a step forward in a higher bandwidth format. So this is the first time we've done this. So I'm excited to see what we can learn from this and how we can iterate. But to set the scene, basically, I'm gonna read through what's come up before. We're in a situation where we have too many ways to move around. So arrow keys in the canvas, have an edit mode, have a navigation mode, have list view. And the question came up, I think, from Alex around how we can consolidate. And I think, Alex, you brought up that you found list view easier to use and similar to what's been done with the navigation block, where there's actually this focus mode and with template parts, having a focus mode where you can go into that mode and see the individual tree of the content there. And there's actually an issue around this currently for applying focus mode to more container blocks. And a discussion was kicked off and has not been super lively thus far. So that's part of why we're having this hallway hangout, is figuring out ways we can consolidate these different methods and kind of upgrade things. And Andrea pointed out previously that back when navigation mode was implemented, things like nested blocks or inner blocks didn't exist. So the current tooling hasn't evolved alongside the project. And so this is an attempt to kind of solve those problems. So that's the context. And at this point, I'd love to take a second and just do brief intros. I think just name, maybe team you're on, and maybe just like light location. You can say like, as much or as little as you want about where you are. But I'll kick it off and then we can do a little round robin before I can share my screen and we can jump into the issue. So I'm Anne McCarthy. I am a sponsor contributor to a WordPress project from Automatic, and I feel like I cut across a number of teams, but definitely am sponsored for Core and the Core Editor folks. And I am in Seattle, Washington. Jerry, do you mind going next?
Sure. I'm Jerry Jones. I work at Inert, but on it at Automatic. Sorry about that. And I focus on theming, but mostly it ends up being just accessibility focused work. And I go to the accessibility meetings at the for .org. And yeah, I guess that's about it. I'm in Kirksville, Missouri, by the way. Sorry. Joe, you're next on my screen. Do you want to go next?
All right. I'm Joe Dawson. I'm a part-time sponsored contributor to WordPress, and I work on accessibility, and I'm a core committer. And I'm in St. Paul, Minnesota. And next for me would be Rich.
Thanks, Joe. I'm Rich Tabor, a product manager / designer at Automatic, and I contribute to WordPress mostly on the site editing Gutenberg front of things. And Andrea, would you like to go next?
Oh, yes, thank you. I'm Andrea Fercia. I'm full-time sponsored to contribute on WordPress, mostly on accessibility. I'm a long-time member of the accessibility team and core committer, together with Joe Dawson. Yes, that's it. Who's next? Peter.
I am Peter Ingersoll. I'm sponsored by myself. I am a co-organizer with the Hartford WordPress meetup. Spend a lot of time in meetups and online things. I'm a self-proclaimed DIY WordPress user advocate. And while I lurk in kind of many of the make groups, accessibility and marketing are actually two areas of keen interest right now. And who do we have? Blake?
Yep. I'm Blake Berticelli Booth. I am part of eQualify and Decubing, two companies that help make my WordPress work possible. I'm primarily interested in the accessibility group in the WordPress communities. I'm in New Orleans. Yeah, we can pass it to Alex now.
I'm Alex. I contribute to accessibility. I'm a DevOps engineer for as the day job goes. Don't work in WordPress anymore, so time is fairly limited. Really enjoy giving back though, and I'm in Plano, Texas, the Dallas area.
Awesome. I think that's everyone. At this point, I'm going to share my screen and show a couple of different issues that relate to this. So to start, there is the overall discussion around consolidating various navigation modes in favor of list view and focus mode. This is where I'm going to recap this conversation and drop a link, and it basically covers what we've already talked about. And this session is meant to kind of address this. So on a related topic, there are also mainly two other issues I wanted to bring up, but as Alex mentioned, there are a ton around this. So one that would unlock this, so if you think about what we need to do in order to possibly pursue this, this is another issue, is allowing focus mode on any container block from the ellipsis menu, which is the 3-dot menu. And right now you can see that they're currently with template parts, you can edit in isolation, aka what we call focus mode, by clicking on the edit button in the block toolbar. This brings you into a view where there's the dark gray background and just an isolated view of this. And basically this is a discussion around bringing it to more blocks, particularly container blocks. So not every single block, but if it's a group block, maybe cover block kind of thing like that, where it's more having more inner blocks in place. This is discussing what this might look like. And so the last one I wanted to bring up is just a minor bug. So when we think about what might block this, and by minor, it's not terribly minor, but focus mode for content types needs a means to immediately return to full-sighting view. So basically, when you enter the mode of focus mode, it's hard to know how to get back. And so that's something that came up whenever I saw this issue open up and I was preparing for this. This is one of the things that, practically speaking, from a working session point of view, something that we'd have to figure out from a user experience point of view is like how this would work in terms of getting back and forth and what we might display, especially in the site editor, in the details view, because currently all of that is kind of nebulous. But yeah, I would love to hear current, either how it works today that we'd like to see resolved, other things on people's minds that we'd have to address in order to make this happen, and kind of, if we were to just start pursuing this, like where do we have to start in terms of combining and deprecating these other tools?
I think a good place to start on that is to just look at exactly what is the difference in the experience between list view and navigation mode. And I'd like to hear start with from Alex on exactly what is the difference between those two modes that is particularly frustrating.
I would love that. Thank you.
So navigation mode is an extremely hacked together feature. And I say that because I believe if you go and look at the selector that deals with the screen reader building behind it, I think it's still marked experimental even now, several years later. The biggest problem we have is that the navigation mode is a dynamically updating button. So every time you press your arrow keys or your tab key when you're in navigation mode, the button dynamically re-renders. And this is a very, very challenging problem to handle with screen readers because it just literally ignores this under certain circumstances. The other problem is because of a long outstanding bug in one of the more popular screen readers on Windows, NVDA, the arrow keys don't actually send the keyboard events through the browser, so tab is really the only viable key. And essentially what happens is when you press tab, not only does the button update, but focus ends up getting placed back on the button because focus attempts to move. The list view is a much simpler design in the way that you can navigate it with your arrow keys. And we actually have it wrapped in an application role. So screen readers on Windows don't have any mode switching side effects of their own. And you kind of lose the ability for left to right navigation in the list view, but you are able to expand the rows and have control over what you're looking at.
So what would be the consequences if we literally just stripped out navigation mode and used list mode navigation as the primary way of browsing through those blocks?
The fact that to date there has been no modals, tips, anything for keyboard users in the editor. So people who are used to this would have absolutely no idea that it changed.
Mm-hmm.
If I may say something, if we are going to remove navigation mode, we will reintroduce basically one of the main issues we had at the very beginning before introducing the two modes, which is, imagine that a post contains dozens of blocks. If you want to navigate these blocks in the post content area with the tab key, you have to go through all the dozens of blocks, including the interface of each block, which is dozens and dozens of tab stops. So navigation mode was originally meant to reduce the amount of tab stops when navigating through the blocks in a way that each block was only one tab stop. And then pressing enter gives the ability to switch the block to a sort of edit mode where you can navigate inside the block with the tab key. This was the original implementation. And it made sense when there were no inner blocks. So the post content was just a list of blocks without nested levels of blocks. And now that there are inner blocks, it is way more complicated. I would say that also without a screen reader, also trying to navigate just with the keyboard, it's extremely complicated to go with the tab key inside inner blocks, navigate the inner blocks, especially when they are laid out horizontally or things like that. It's basically very, very difficult to understand where you are and what the selected block is.
So if I could clarify a little bit, when I say remove navigation mode and use list mode as the primary, what I literally mean is using the same trigger that would currently move you into navigation mode, move you into your location in the list. So that you then still have that ability to navigate the blocks. You're just not doing it directly in the content, because the list mode basically works the same way. You go block to block, you can activate it and it can move you into the block, and then you use that escapement to get back to your list view. And then we only have one navigation tool.
Yeah, I understand. Still, the list of blocks is focusable. So there are focusable elements there. So when you use the tab key, you are going through all those elements.
Though it's a lot fewer elements than what you get in the blocks themselves. I mean, I feel like we should be willing to compromise to some degree. It doesn't necessarily need to be, we can skip absolutely everything.
Well, also the tab, if you're currently in edit mode and you press tab, it gets intercepted by the writing flow wrapper and focus gets placed in the sidebar. That's not going away, at least not yet. That's a different discussion.
Hmm.
I would like to figure out a better way at some point to manage focus in between the block editor and the block sidebar. But that's unfortunately an entirely different discussion with its own very, very special complications.
Yeah, I think we opened an issue about that or found one after the last Halloween Hangout.
Jerry and I have made some very, very good first steps to getting there, but we have a very long battle ahead of us for that.
So on this whole topic, I mean, let's talk about the arguments against using the list view as our primary keyboard navigation tool. You know, Andrea raised the topic that there are still focusable elements within the list view. On the other hand, it also does support arrow key navigation. Does that work for you, Alex, the arrow key navigation in the list view?
Yeah, so the arrow key navigation is 100% accessible, and there are a total of 3 tabbable elements inside the list view. There is the tab panel, there is the close button, and then there is the list view area itself.
So it seems, I mean, functionally, it seems workable to me that would be something that we could do. It seems like a better strategy than trying to continue to hack together the complexities of the navigation mode. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know what kinds of side effects that could have. It does change things, but I mean, I think people are accustomed to that.
Another problem we currently have in the navigation mode is it's not entirely clear when you have inner blocks. I'd worked on a pull request at one point to try to fix that, but ended up abandoning it for the list view work. Because right now, if you're at, say, a columns block, it's going to tell you you're at block position 2 of 6. But it doesn't actually notate, hey, this block has inner blocks. Use your right arrow key to explore. Which once you move into an inner block, then you have to use your up and down arrows to explore. It's the horizontal and vertical navigation is a horrible pain in the editor. It's something that might make more sense visually. I can't speak to that, but it's a nightmare navigating with keyboard.
Yeah, I think it's pretty dubious whether it makes any sense visually, but
I do like that. I didn't consider that idea of just getting rid of navigation mode and using the list view as the comparable.
Basically becomes the navigation mode. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, it basically would become the navigation mode.
Yeah. I think that's quite a good idea. I think it makes the navigation mode a lot clearer what it is, because and it just seems like a better version of what we were trying to do with navigation mode.
I mean, for me, a lot of the value is simply not having as many different mechanisms. It allows us, it just makes the whole process of developing this so much more simple.
It gets rid of a button in the header as well. Because there's
Indeed.
We could also, we have done tooltips of when we moved template parts to patterns. That is something that I think is slowly being done, where it's like, hey, if you're looking for this, it's moved. Or like when we have the split tabs in the block settings. And I think something like that could be done, where you could put, just in terms of thinking through unblocking, people not knowing that it's changed. I think there's a way to do that. I also could see this being just as like testing ground. I think using this, I don't know if folks would be up for exploring this, but I'm a big fan of using the experiments page in Gutenberg and turning it on as an experiment, doing a call for testing, getting feedback, and kind of getting something practical in place where that is just like removed, and what happens and what bugs come up, and how does it, compare to the current experience? Because I think sometimes that helps move it into a more practical space. Like for example, that being able to switch back and forth between when you're in focus mode and returning to the full sighting view. Like maybe for now we can implement list view as the new navigation mode, but there's also something to be said for that focus mode and kind of thinking that through. And I could see a way in which we could enable kind of both, where it's like an experiment that deprecates navigation mode, uses list view, and then adds focus mode to container blocks. And like, what does that actually look like when we start doing that? Where does it fall apart? I would love to see that happen as kind of an outcome, just to try and get it moving and try it out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, I think that would be totally reasonable.
I'm also not terribly worried about it if we're going to keep escape moving into the list view.
That was, that's exactly what I was thinking, is just allow escape to move to list view.
At least for now, until we absolutely have to take that key elsewhere.
Right.
But
I mean, the
don't see
idea in
that.
my mind is essentially literally just mapping the navigation mode using the same controls to trigger it, but mapping it into list view.
Yeah, I personally don't see any downsides to that at the moment. I think it would be a much improved experience.
And I think it's a good idea to try it as an experiment, just to see what happens. I mean, we have no way of knowing how many people are accustomed to that mode as a way of getting around the editor visually using the keyboard. And it is a change, but I think it's very much worth trying.
I will also note that we won't get any feedback most likely from screen reader users because it's currently broken on Windows.
Oh, and that's, I mean, honestly, I think the feedback we're worried about is more for non-screen reader users.
Agreed.
Because we're taking away something that only occasionally works for screen readers. It's not.
I wonder on that front, I mean, I do work for Automatic, and sometimes I can get some insights from WordPress.com in terms of usage around stuff. I mean, obviously that's like not all of WordPress, but it is sometimes a good check. I can also explore getting some insights there, and maybe from different hosting companies. Like every once in a while, we can get some good information on like pattern usage or how people are finding insertion points. I'll add that just to see if we can even get a ballpark of like on WordPress.com, this percentage of users, this is how often they use it, or this is when they switch. So I think that could be good to bring in, at least as like a confidence check.
It'd be interesting to have just a general idea of how much is that used. But I mean, it's good to keep in mind that we're not, I mean, while we're removing navigation mode in this conversation, it's not that the mechanism will be gone, it's just that it will be mapped to something else that already exists. So it'll change the way it presents.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just gonna ask, I'm not sure how much it's used, but I kind of wonder if we should remove that tools menu at the same time.
Tools menu. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the label on it is tools.
Okay, I was wondering, I'm going to be honest here. You mentioned that there was a button in the toolbar for turning on the navigation mode, and I looked for it because like, I don't know what that is. And I did not find it because I would not have guessed that it was tools. But now I get what that's supposed to do. That is literally a button I've never clicked on.
I know.
I was only
Yeah,
aware of
same
being able
here.
to switch between those using the escape key.
Yeah, I think that would be a win to remove that button.
Yeah, I mean, if we don't have that mode anymore, then that button becomes irrelevant. You know, it is because now we've got the list view that gives us the interface that we actually want. I mean, I'm all 100% in favor of getting rid of a button that is confusing.
Same. So
I do think.
Oh, go ahead, Rich.
I was gonna say, I think Yeah, it's Rich here. I do think the current use, primary use for that particular view is for on mobile though. So we have to see about the cost of removing that select mode and what that does for mobile. Because what it does is it makes it easier to select child first nested blocks. So it's easier to tap onto them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's code-wise actually two different files at the moment. We have the main code lives in block selection button, and I believe there's a native file for that.
On that note,
Yeah, I think-
Rich, you're describing list view. It also, I'm looking at it, I forgot, this came up previously from Nomad Skateboarding, who was doing a call for testing for the outreach program, and it doesn't, you can't use list view on mobile sizes unless you put your phone in landscape mode. Which is not, I'll share my screen again. Which I think relates to what you're describing. So this might be something we need to unblock in order to actually switch this over. Yeah, this came up later.
How
Yeah,
do
I
you
think it's worth-
actually trigger the navigation mode on mobile?
It would just be with the tool.
Like
I can't see the button.
Yeah, you're right. Where is it at?
So I don't know where to find it.
Might be the case of just needing to maintain it but not have it there if it's being invoked otherwise. I'm gonna check on
Yeah, because that's
Love how everyone's looking at their phones now.
yeah.
Yeah, no, this is good. This is working session. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Yep.
we just found another accessibility issue.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the implementation of it. If you're saying like remove navigation mode, press escape, and then does the list view open as well?
I think it should. I mean, for me, that would be extremely helpful. And that would be definitely a difference, but I would get a lot of value out of seeing that presentation of context.
Yeah, I just was making sure that I understood what the implementation was. And then would the, like the black select box, would it also enter into that, or would we just try to remove that idea?
The black select,
Like
the way the block tool
mm-hmm.
bar changes. I think that's still useful. I don't know. That could be an implementation detail that could get worked out.
Okay. Because yeah, I think if that's the case, then change is just press escape, open list view, and also enter this navigation mode. And remove that top tools button.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, having that there, I'm trying to think of whether there's any real advantage to it, and I don't know. Well, it gives you the drag surface.
Yeah, we're gonna have to refactor some of the shortcut stuff though, because there's some very, very fun code that I had to write to make the focus move when the list view is open.
Well, if it was fun, then, totally worth doing again, right?
I guess one could say that.
Cool. I mean, it seems like a worthwhile experimentation. Any
Yeah,
other
I
thoughts?
agree. I think the only other thing that's on my mind that I don't know the answer to is how the experience would work with locked blocks. So the template, let me share my screen. I was just trying to mess around with this.
Sure.
And this could just be, this is probably me having lack of knowledge, but one of the things list view does is communicate different states of things. So, in this case, I can select all these things, but right now, communicating this, that it's locked. This is, sorry, let me take a step back. So I am editing a page in the site editor right now. And what this is showing are different locked fields because I'm editing a page within a larger template. And so when we think about list view replacing navigation mode, figuring out how to communicate these different states, I think is going to be likely an eventual challenge. And I know,
I mean, it's already communicated visually. Is that information not shared?
I'm nearly positive it is. I just am thinking
Oh.
about like if we're, right now, if I bet one of the issues right now is it's probably not shared.
Yes,
and
it does say the ARIA label on that component
says locked.
link says that it's locked, says the paragraph and it's locked. So
Yeah, I remember we covered it for that.
Okay.
so it is communicated.
Okay, good.
Our challenge is going to be the whole issue around inert.
Yeah, which isn't really directly about the navigation so much as it's about actually perceiving the block itself.
It would be both in this concept because the list view isn't going to tell you that that block is locked for whatever reason. And when you go to select it, you're going to get nothing because focus won't move.
So I guess we need some kind of it needs a state indicator that informs you in the list view that this is not an editable block. And I obviously it shouldn't be locked because it's not locked content.
Yeah, that kind of is where my brain is.
But
I don't know. That's just something I've been thinking about is those curation tools and how we have communicated that in list view and how it would work since it would be used in a greater
I think
a greater way. Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly what the best term would be or icon or whatever, but I think communicating that in the list view should be relatively trivial. I mean, just kind of making a statement in the list view item that this is inert. The same as it says paragraph locked, comments block inert, or I'm not sure inert is the right word because I'm not sure that's going to give people the comprehension of what that really means. People can learn it, of course, but there might be a better way of phrasing that. I would require a little bit of exploration.
There's two sides to the inert conversation, right? Like there's the one side is should the comment form block itself be inert, or should we figure out how to allow some keyboard interaction so that way screen reader users kind of have an idea of what the code is going to output on the front end. So that was an easy enough fix. We had to do some JavaScript gymnastics, but it was an easy enough fix to disable the form and to allow keyboard interaction so that way people know what the form is going to look like, for lack of a better word. For these inert situations, it's a little different because there's really no good way to explain to a blind user what a template looks like in the context of editing a smaller portion like a page. So I would almost go as far to say that not only do we need to figure out a way to describe that inert state, but it might even be a good idea down the road to add a checkbox that says, I don't want to see these blocks. Because if you can't see it, it's utterly useless, really.
Yeah, or we need a way to better communicate.
I don't know. I think you still need to know what's on the page. I mean, even if you can't edit the comments form, knowing there is a comments form on this page seems like very important information.
No, I agree with you. I think we should definitely represent it, but I think if users are editing a page and maybe they know what's on the page, but they just want to focus on stuff that they can change, we should be able to deliver that for users.
Got it. I see. We're talking about editing the content now, not about browsing the view.
No, we're talking about browsing the view. Because if I'm in the list view, right, and I want to
Yeah.
change paragraph 3, I don't want to have to arrow through the logo, the header, the
Mhm.
navigation.
Ah, okay. I see. Then in the site editing.
There is a way to toggle the template preview on and off. It's pretty hidden right now, but you'll see, I'll just explain this. Like there's a button in the sidebar under the page settings when you're editing a page in the site editor that if you click on template, I think this is very hidden. You can basically check on and off the option to have that template preview. So if you turn it on and it's checked on, you'll then see like the header template part and the footer template part. If you turn it off, it only shows the content that you can then directly edit. So that actually is something we can probably, if we want to hide those things, I wonder if this is as simple as having like not as simple, but a command palette command that's like toggle this on and off, or at a default state, have it off, or having a way to have that as like an option. But I'm just noting this as something that has been explored, both because people often want to see the template preview, but not all the time. Like having the option to turn it on and off is something that we've heard a lot.
I will be honest that I think that the label on that button is terrible.
Yeah.
If I saw that, I would have gotten the impression that what I was going to be doing
It's
is
like
linking over
previewing a
to
new
do a
tab.
preview.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah, I
agree.
agree.
I
That
should
whole
probably be
piece
something
there.
like preview enabled, or I don't know.
Show template. I know. Yeah.
It is so
like
incredibly, show template is that would be
Mhm.
good. Yeah.
I'll open an issue for that just in case there's not
Because
one already.
I
But
mean
yeah, I
it's
agree.
incredibly buried. So yeah, nobody would ever find that. But yeah, I wouldn't know what to do with it even if I did find it.
Yeah, but that way we give the control back to users. So like if you just want to focus on the editable content, great. If you need like an overall view of your content plus the header and the whole site, then you can also have that. But for people who can't see, all they're going to get anyway is header, navigation. You know, I can see where this probably adds a lot of benefit for people with sight. I just don't see how it adds the same benefit for people without, other than basic page structure.
Can I ask whether that setting is persistent or is it view specific?
I'm nearly positive it's view specific. Let me.
Because
quickly-
having it be persistent would be of a lot greater value, in my opinion.
Okay, let me
Because
test it.
if I want that, I probably am going to want it for a working session, not just for the moment.
Yeah, no, it's not. Wait. Hold on. Oh, interesting. If you move out into the site view where you're back, the details view open, the preview obviously shows the whole template, but if you go back in, it does seem persistent. Let me go all the way out of the site editor though and back in.
So it might need some exploration to figure out what the scope of its persistence is.
Yeah. I also, another thing that touches on what we've talked about with this, yeah, it's not fully persistent if you go out of the site editor. It goes back to the normal setting. I'll
Okay.
note that as well. Open issue around persistent.
I mean, I think that's also part of the conversation of where that setting should exist. I mean, because
100%.
if it's something that is kind of a user configuration and you can just make it global and be like, this is what I want, I don't, then that's kind of different.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a great call out though, because it's a new thing that's been implemented. It's a small detail, but it could have a broader implication for this work here.
Yeah, I mean, certainly for Alex, like
Mhm.
having a view where you can only edit the things that you can edit is clearly
Important.
of greater value.
Yeah. What do you all, I'm curious, just being mindful of time, around focus mode. And because right now we've been mainly focusing on list view and how list view works.
Right.
But focus mode is also something to consider here. And in thinking about like enabling this as an experiment, we could just keep it narrowed in scope to just list view. But I am curious about adding focus mode to more container blocks, and if that kind of more curated, narrow list view option where you can kind of go in and edit something is a value to push on right now.
So I
Or
guess
if
my
that just
question
feels too much.
is what exactly does focus mode do? I mean, I
Mhm.
have seen it visually that it drops the rest of the frame out of sight, but I don't know what it's actually doing. Like, is that material actually gone, rendered inert? Is it essentially presenting in a modal? What does it do?
Good question. I don't know, Jerry, if you could speak to this. I know what it looks like visually and the intent of it from like a user experience. It's supposed to kind of focus you into just editing that specific content. So I'm displaying it now. For template parts, we have this edit button. What's being talked about for the future is imagining it here where you would have it in the 3-dot menu, and you could go down and click edit in focus mode or whatever the phrasing would be. But in this case, it brings you in here, and it basically allows for the list view then only shows what's here, what's in that specific template
So it
part.
does look like it's basically dropping you into a sub editor. It's an editor that only
Yes.
contains this material.
Mhm.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's
yeah, I mean,
essentially it's essentially as if you were looking at any other page in the editor, except for there's, you know, the controls to resize, the back button, and some padding around the editor.
Yeah.
That's how I would see it.
And
Yeah,
you
I
can go
mean,
back.
that makes sense to me. One of the things we need to figure out is the predictability of where that back button goes. That will be a big problem if not handled properly.
Okay.
Because if I'm editing a block that's 50 blocks down and I press back and I'm not back at that block where I pressed edit from, that was a complete waste of time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just a very much a standard is you go into a new mode. When you go back out of it, you need to go back to where you were before.
Yeah, like in this case,
and
I click
to
on
a
this
very
here.
fine degree of detail.
Yeah, this just drops me back into nothing.
Yeah, and
like
what
nothing's
I would
needed.
expect, honestly, what I would probably prefer is when you go back, you literally land on the edit button. So you are exactly where you were when you started.
As long as it's not inside a menu, because then it's just weird.
I mean, it would also be fine to just go and have the block selected, the block that you are editing.
Yeah, just somewhere close, because that's a big problem the site editor suffers from right now, is you just never know where focus is going to land.
Can you
Yeah.
delete the block from focus mode?
No, so it's restricted. So you can't really, like if I go in here, you'll notice, sorry, let me move you all over. These controls are all limited. In the future, we're looking at adding patterns here, kind of baked into the experience. But no, you can basically only edit the inner blocks. You can't edit the overall container.
Okay. I mean, you know, the only reason I was asking is because the behavior of a back button in this context would be a lot more complicated if you could delete the object you were editing. And as long as you can't do that, and it is consistent with any of these focus modes that you cannot delete the thing you're working on, then I think it's fine. Because that just raises all sorts of problems with where do you dump focus when the object you are editing no longer exists.
Yeah, that's actually not to like shift this too much, but that's also another problem that we're trying to solve right now. So like there are certain blocks that actually completely change their content, and one of those blocks is I think it's the custom HTML block. If you go in and select the preview mode, it completely re-renders. And if you select HTML, it completely re-renders. So when you tab back from the toolbar, there's nothing to focus on. So I've been working on creating a kind of a global fix for that in writing flow, but it's very hard to predict where to put focus back I mean, it's easy for us. We could go fix the block, but the idea here is to try to avoid this for other third-party developers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think having something like a focus mode on any group would be valuable.
Mhm.
I know, I mean, I find certain things very frustrating always about editing in groups, and most of it has to do with the visibility of boundaries. I can't tell exactly where in the group and out of the group is. And focus mode would certainly help narrow that down. I think one of my most common errors is when inserting a block where there is a group and I want to insert the block either inside at the end of the group or after the group, being able to distinguish which one I'm actually doing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's come up. There's a, where is it? At least with drag and drop, that's something that's come up in a recent issue around exposing before and after in the drag and drop experience. And just generally, like, I think that that's something that
I don't know
comes
about
up
drag.
a fair
This
amount.
isn't from drag and drop. This is just from using the floating
Yes.
inserter. But
Yeah.
Well, the other problem around that we need to discuss at some point is the fact that there's no way to do that with the keyboard.
no way to do which thing.
If you have an existing group, how do you move a block into it?
Yeah.
I mean, you could move the block before the group or after the group, but there's no way to actually add the block to the group.
I would expect you to be able to select it, cut it, move into the group, add a block, and paste it.
In theory, that should work. But what I would rather see is some type of like move dialogue or something for keyboard users.
Yeah, interesting.
Because if you go to like the more menu or the options menu, there's an insert before, there's an insert after, there's a group option, so you can create a new group from there, but there's no way to move in and out of an existing group.
I'll be honest, the cut and paste option is what I usually do, but and that's because I find the drag and drop too difficult to use, but
Understandable. I mean, I never even considered that, but it would probably be pretty solid in the list view right now.
Do you all mind with, like, I'm just trying to be aware of time, if I went through what I see as kind of next steps and issues to open, just so we're on the same page and I'm not missing anything?
no, go right ahead.
Is that cool?
As far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, so in my mind, there's a couple issues to open and some known ones as well. So list view not working on mobile is something that we'd have to explore. Communicating lock blocks and curation tooling around Inert, which I found a GitHub issue about that and finding alternatives to Inert. Adding focus mode to more container blocks. Opening an issue about the back button where it goes after you're returning from focus mode and ensuring it returns you ideally back to where the edit button is. Opening an issue around persistence of template preview option and making it a user setting potentially. Opening an issue around changing template preview to show template, because that's not well communicated. Trying to get data around usage for navigation mode from WordPress.com. And then in general, basically trying to make all of what we've discussed an experiment in Gutenberg. So deprecating navigation mode, maybe adding a little tooltip, which I think would be good to do. Let me make a note about that. Tooltip. And then doing a call for testing. And ideally, I don't know how much work it would be to add focus mode to each container block. I can't imagine it's that much work, but that's like famous last words. You know, so I'm going to be careful there. But I think it would be interesting to explore that. Also, I want to know alongside this, the work to rename almost all blocks has shipped. And so that also works really well. So if you have the ability to both rename a container block, so say a group block, and you say like, this is your about me, you can then go into focus mode for your about me section. Like there's a lot of communication that then shows up within the list view and naming That just adds a lot more clarity rather than you're looking at a sea of group blocks and you're trying to figure out which ones to edit.
Yep, definitely.
Adding
That
focus
was an
modes.
amazing feature.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this because I think a lot of what we're talking about will hopefully reduce duplication and then also provide like real value to a lot of folks. And hopefully we can flesh this out a bit more. But yeah, in my mind, I want to see if we can get this as an experiment in Gutenberg and kind of propose that and then see if we can do a call for testing at some point. I have no sense of timeline for this and who could possibly help with a lot of this stuff. So some of this will require some wrangling, but that's what's on from my notes, what's come up.
I think there was one thing that I may have just missed, but there were concerns about how navigation mode is used on mobile, and then we couldn't identify exactly what it's doing. So that I think needs a little exploration of what the navigation mode's role on mobile currently is.
Okay. Navigation. Mode on.
There is also another really big concern that I just thought about. We need to be super, super mindful of the fact that block editor can be implemented by other block editors. And the list view is in there, but that doesn't mean that it's used. So if we remove this navigation mode, there's no guarantee that third-party editors would use the list view in place of navigation mode.
So
are you talking about Gutenberg as a framework? Yeah. Sorry.
Are we talking about like blocks everywhere? Are we talking about
blocks everywhere would
if
be an
Drupal
example
implements
of this?
Or I mean, blocks everywhere has its own set of problems that are rooted in the fact that like there are some blocks that have content editing in the sidebar, which is terrible.
It does, but like if we take like what's currently happening on the support forums, for example, where you can insert blocks with that, and there's no more navigation mode, that could create a very serious problem.
So it could turn out, I mean, we could conceivably do something where it's conditional in that if the list mode exists, use the list mode. It's also, I feel like it should be possible to implement a version of the list mode that doesn't actually expose the list, so that at least that navigation technique is available within other blocks. But I do appreciate that is a relevant concern that probably needs to be addressed. I do think, the third-party usages of the editor should be considered somewhat separately from making the best possible editor for WordPress. I mean, other implementations kind of need to deal with their own problems.
Yeah,
they
but
can also build things in.
I want to note that as it stands right now, the navigation mode itself is all built into the third-party block editor package.
Yeah.
Where the list view itself is in block editor, but it's used in edit post and edit site with your WordPress specific React packages.
So, I mean, maybe the navigation mode stays for third party, but we don't use it in core. I don't know.
Or we
I'm not sure. I still feel like it should be dealt with because it's not a great package. And so I'm not sure that it's beneficial to continue to ship it as part of the third party packages. It might make more sense to try and replace it in the third party packages. But it's certainly a good point.
Yeah, it's just something we need to be aware of and to discuss. I'm not sure what the rules are for deprecating out of third party like that. But
yeah, that's something I can talk to Riyadh about too. Because I know this has come up. I mean, automatic, obviously. We use this and with the isolated block editor for a lot of our internal systems. So I can also try and figure out kind of what that looks like. But it's something, Gutenberg as a framework is something Riyadh is pushing on and creating a documentation website for. So it could be as simple as like, hey, this is being deprecated. Please move to enabling the list view package if you want to have these kinds of features. Like this is where we're developing. So in my mind, that is a really good good thing to bring up, and we will have to consider it.
I will note,
I'll
if,
tag that in.
if navigation mode, I think Alex mentioned earlier that he thought that navigation mode might still be marked as experimental.
Mhm.
If that is in fact true, then we can absolutely deprecate it.
Yeah.
I mean, there should be no barriers to removing a theoretically experimental package.
No, that was misleading.
That was misleading. You
So-
misled me.
So the block navigation button itself is very much stable, but the selector that gets the information is still marked experimental or unstable or one of the two.
Okay.
At least it
Well, that's
was
pretty
at one
bizarre.
point. I'm not sure if it's ever changed.
Anyway, it's something that needs to be addressed, but I do think that I think that package probably needs something, either work or deprecation.
Yeah.
But ideally, we would just move the sidebar logic into the block editor and create like some type of third-party sidebar. Because the list view is already there. It's a sidebar functionality that we've exported out elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
The sidebar calls the list view. So the list view is there, the implementation isn't there.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. Kind of weird, but
Yeah. Well,
it's because of that word count and stuff that we have built in for the post editor, and then it doesn't exist in the side editor.
Yeah. We're at the hour, and I actually have another call, I'm afraid. But this was, I don't know, from my perspective, this was really helpful. And I really appreciate doing this working session style thing. I think we should consider it for more things. Particularly, I know modals have come up a fair amount. And I know some of the data views work also could probably benefit from digging into this kind of collective, having designers, developers, all sorts of people in the room going through this. So I will look to continue to run these, and yeah, feedback is always welcome, either on the recap post, or you can always DM me at Anzazu on Make Slack. But I really appreciate this, and I'm excited about it. I'm going to see what we can do to kind of move this forward and get it as an experiment. So stay tuned. Yeah, thank you all for taking the time.
Alrighty.
Amazing. Thanks.
Thanks, Ann.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Later.
Bye all.